I am Harsh Verma, welcoming you to the seventh session in which we are going to talk about wireless networking. So, as promised, we are going to take a deep dive how actually the wireless network works, what are its infrastructure, and different kind of protocols they use. So, it is very logical to say that a wired network is the network in which the data passes over the wire and is quite limited by the physical properties of wire. Wire may be metallic strands or the optical cable, which still possess some of the limited capabilities. In fact, for particularly Ethernet guidelines, IEEE defined Section 802.3 as its standard. The constraints that a person may face by using wire are like maximum length limit or to incapacity to connect some remote regions, incompatibility between devices using different protocols, and the modern technology that promotes the use of portable handheld device. So by using wireless standards, most of the problems were directly eradicated. But to set the protocol standard, IEEE defined A22.11 standard that all manufacturers had to abide by to enable communication between them. So it is no doubt that wireless communication happens on radio waves, and radio waves are electromagnetic waves, which is slightly different from the mechanical waves that we hear. Yes, I am talking about sound and is slightly more related to light waves because light wave is also an electromagnetic wave. This is not a physics class, so we are not going into detail what a difference between a mechanical and an electromagnetic wave. But a quick revision is that electromagnetic waves has the ability to travel in vacuum while mechanical waves require some medium to travel. And that's enough. The property of wave that is necessary in networking communication is the how waves interact with the environment. We have already read this in our physics class that wave tends to have properties like reflection, absorption, diffraction, scattering, and interference. Let's revise that before getting started on wireless networking. So the reflection is the bouncing of signal after striking on a solid surface, while the absorption is the fading of signal. By fading off, I mean getting weaker by striking on a soft surface. Diffraction and scattering are quite like the same, but diffraction occurs when a wave strikes to a corner of something sharp and get split into secondary smaller waves, while scattering is the diffusion of signal when they encounter an uneven surface. Scattering also occurs with the presence of particulate matter in environment like dust, smoke, or water vapors. And finally, the interference is the mixing of response of two or more devices communicating on the same wave cycle. A wave means something is moving back and forth or to and fro from one point to another and finally returns to its initial position. And wave cycle is measured in hertz. A hertz stands for one cycle in 1 second. So whenever we talk about something is n number of hertz, we means that something oscillates for the nth time in a second. We will keep getting bigger and larger number in this chapter like kilohertz, gigahertz, megahertz. So for example, if I say that something is of 1 gigahertz, it oscillates 1 giga or billion times in a second, which is quite a lot number. Now after getting our physics clear, let's continue our Wi-Fi and wireless networking stuff. So to propagate a wave, in order to communicate, we use a special device called access point, and the region where the access point has its range or where it is usable is called a basic service set. So the service set is the area and it comes in various forms or in many varieties. So the most basic form is the basic service set. And for every basic set, the access point will be the single point of contact. And how do we know that where we have to connect? So right after configuring and turning on the access point, it advertises itself with SSID, which stands for Service Set Identifier. And it is nothing complex, it's just the name of the Wi Fi that you found in your notification bar. And if you ever created hotspot on your smartphone, you already noticed that it offers to rename the hotspot. The renaming of hotspot is what you are configuring the SSID. Now when there is option to rename to whatever we like, then where does the uniqueness go that is required in a network? The uniqueness comes from the MAC address of the access point that is obviously burned in, and here in wireless scenario we called that address a BSSID, which is an another term given for MAC address and stands for basic service set identifier. And the process of connecting to a Wi-Fi is known as association. By using word Wi-Fi, we are being too casual, so don't get upset about it if I say the word AP in further video. If you have ever been in hotel that has free Wi-Fi access, you must have noticed that a hotel has multiple Wi-Fi. One for reserved member only, second is for passers-by, third is for guest ID, or another one for its personal management. So from a single access point, what do these different Wi-Fi represent? If you recall our past few videos, you will remember that we have talked about VLANs and stuff. Actually, the access point is advertising the VLANs created by its IT department over the air, and the every different Wi-Fi that we found are separated by channels, hence appear different but are originated from a single access point. Now the topic seem interesting as we are blending two things in one. This is a very interesting chapter as it is quite practical because we use Wi-Fi much more than any other form of connection. So now keep going with track. You have certainly noticed that the Wi-Fi hotspot of your phone only works for a particular range or quite limited range. But certainly you have seen Wi-Fi connecting complete campus, or if you visit any rail wire enabled railway station, at every few meters or distance, a Google sponsored access point is placed on phone. And once you connect to the far right of access point and keep walking to the extreme left, you notice that your connection does not drop. So, what kind of black magic is this? The answer is all the access points are part of a single service set, which is known as ESS, Extended Service Set. And when we travel from far left to right, we are losing and initiating associations with one or more access point. The access point shares the user data with one another, telling that the user is leaving this zone and coming towards you to the next access point, and thus it will continue the session from there. And the process of changing zones of different access point is known as roaming. Now again, come back to our smartphone hotspot, a network that has quite limited range. We can also talk about our home Wi-Fi, which is a single access point delivering connection to all the devices in our home network, is termed as IBSS, which stand for Independent Basic Service Set, which means that this access point is not talking with any other access point in order to facilitate connection. In the world of networking, I am sure that sometime you must have come or heard a name of device known as repeater, and sometime it is also known as a range extender. It is a device which is quite like its name, extend the range of an access point to several more kilometers by repeating the signal or directing the signal into a specific direction. So until now we are all talking about the devices with Wi-Fi capabilities built in. But what about those old computer or the computer without a network card or those legacy hardware that functions well but still want to implement a wireless connection to them? We use another device that is called WGB, which stands for Work Group Bridge. In past some of videos, when we talk about spanning tree protocol, I have already told that bridge used to be a networking device that is just like switch. It acts as an interface between a end host to a router. So here, work group bridge bridges the gap of a wired device by letting it connect to a wireless network. With its help, it actually translates the Wi-Fi signal to a wired signal wherever required by the device. It comes in two variants. First is Universal Workgroup Bridge, which support translation for a one specific device, and an another variant known as Workgroup Bridge, which is Cisco proprietary implementation with support for multiple devices. It is quite common to get a look of a cable TV like radar between two buildings, especially in case of CCTV camera implementation. As I said, it quite resembles the cable TV satellite, but it actually a form of another type of bridge known as point to point bridge, which is quite directional and enables the communication of set-top box in far off building connecting to the building on the another side. And from now the talk of Wi-Fi starts. So from few years earlier there were two variants of Wi-Fi, and the third one is recent one. The two variants were 2.4 GHz and 5 GHz, while the recent one is 6 GHz. The 2.4 GHz is the oldest form of Wi-Fi introduced in original standard 802.11, which consists of 14 channels technically, but some channels are specified for a specific country, so there are actually 11 channels usable. By saying 2.4 GHz, this Wi-Fi operates on different channels ranging from 2.4 to 2.48 GHz. In this Wi-Fi scenario, the interference is quite common as it uses the overlapping channels. Overlapping here means there is no defined value for each channel. So if we name the 11 usable channel as its indexing, the first channel slightly overlaps with second, second with third, third with fourth, and it's keep continuing. So in order to reduce the interference, we have to use channels that are far from each other. That will be our channel number 1, channel number 6, and channel number 11. First is extreme first, while the second channel is the middle one, and the third channel is the last usable channel. This overlapping channel issue is solved in the next iteration, that is of 5 GHz. The 5 GHz also consists of multiple channels, but here the channels have defined boundary with 8 specified range. The ranges we call UNII 1 to 8. UNII stands for Unlicensed National Information Infrastructure, and for understanding, the first UNII consists of frequencies 5.150 to 5.250 GHz, and after that UNI 2 starts from 5.250 to 5.350 gigahertz. As further is quite understandable. The third type is Wi-Fi 6 that works on 6 gigahertz channel and is not covered in our syllabus. So if you wish to know about Wi-Fi 6, feel free to do a Google search or read a Wikipedia article. Now we are going to talk about different Wi-Fi standards. The original 802.11 standard was ratified in 1997, and if we sort the standards chronologically, the 802.11 remains the same in all of their name with addition of a alphabet in last. So remembering year is not important, but remembering speeds and the alphabet that is attached to 802.11 is important. So to speedily call every amendment, the first original 802.11 does not contain any alphabet. The original 802.11 does not contain any alphabet. Then the second amendment adds the letter B, while the third amendment adds the letter A. The fourth adds letter G, fifth add letter N, sixth add letter AC, and finally the seventh amendment adds the letter AX. And now the time for speed run for all these amendments. The original Wi-Fi supports speed up to 2 Mbps. The second amendment, that is consists of letter B, supports 11 Mbps. The third one with letter A supports 54 Mbps, and the 802.11 A becomes the first Wi-Fi having a 5 GHz band. Actually, it only have 5 GHz band with no support of 2.4 GHz. Then comes the 802.11G that also supports 54 Mbps with supporting both kind of bands 2.4 and 5 GHz too. After that, we get 802.11N which supports speed up to 600 Mbps and is commonly known as Wi-Fi 4. It also has support of both kind of band. Then after that we got the AC version which supports speed up to 6.93 gigabits per second and is commonly known as Wi-Fi 5. It lacks the Wi-Fi 2.4 GHz support and only supports the 5 GHz band. And lastly, the AX1 makes the speed up to 4 times of 6.93 GHz and is commonly known as Wi-Fi 6. It also supports both the band. I hope you get it correctly. Otherwise, don't worry, I will post a table for all the speeds along with their band support in my communities tab. So make sure to check that out. Now we are going to start the actual infrastructure of a real networking environment. There is a standard already defined by Cisco, which is called a three-tier structure. To have the maximum efficiency in a network, these standards must have to be followed, but engineers feel free to make the necessary changes depending on the organization needs. So the structure is having three different layers of switches enabling the maximum uptimes and super solid redundancy. The first layer of switch is called core switch. The second layer will called a distribution switch, and finally the switch that connects to the end device is known as access layer switch. The reasons behind implementing so much switch are the scalability, which means that the network infrastructure can be expanded as the network or the devices in organization grows. It also provides solid redundancy at all levels, which means it ensures that the network remains operational even if one or more switch or device fails. The different kinds of switches have different functions assigned to them and they have different responsibilities. So it's like a pyramid structure. So it also helps the network management staff to manage the complete setup of network. It even enhances the security of the whole network as security features like access control list, network filtering, or policy making can be implemented on the per kind of device level. The core switches are some specialized switches with very high throughput speed. The full time availability and minimal latency and packet loss is the main objective here. While in distribution switch, it acts as aggregation of access layer switches and it is the layer in which policy based security mechanisms are applied. And finally, the access layer switches, which is sprinkled throughout the building or infrastructure, delivering power over Ethernet as well as connections to different sort of devices. In the access layer, the quality of service like prioritizing certain traffics while dropping other ones and the port security implementations are done. And when we talk about the wireless network, the access layer also features a device that enables the propagation of radio waves to which our wireless devices work. So, in terms of wireless networking context, we also called access layer as distribution system. The device that propagates the wireless signal is called AP, which stands for access point, and the point where AP connects to a wired network is called a distribution system. That will be our access layer. So now back to our deployment structure of the wireless infrastructure. By the term deployment structure, we are talking about where the controls of the wireless network exist. It comes in three varieties: a autonomous, a cloud-based, or a split structure. I know that these are self-explanatory terms, but certainly I need to share some very important point. The autonomous structure is the most simplest and easy deployment of a Wi-Fi in a wide network. It is a device that directly connects to switch and broadcasts all the information on the radio waves so that wireless device can connect and make benefit of it. However, it comes with its own limitation, like it don't have such roaming facility that we have talked earlier, and also managing each and every access point is a very tedious task, so it also a no-no from the management staff. Mitigating some of its disadvantage, we come to discuss cloud-based deployment, in which a device that connects to switch has specialized firmware that's connect to a software running in cloud. Hence, all the management can be done from a single place. Along with automatic deployment benefits, it also comes with separation of data and control plane, which means that the user data does not need to be transferred into cloud and can be routed locally, while the control data that is required to manage the WLC itself are sent on cloud. However, the disadvantage of this type of deployment is that it requires the specialized hardware firsthand, which means that not every WLC wireless link controller comes with cloud-based support. And now the ultimate deployment structure of wireless networking, that is split structure, which is often called split MAC structure. In this structure, a pair of device is deployed on a network, one for actual transmission of network waves, while the other for ease of management. And by having such two devices, it becomes the most efficient deployment method, as having a powerful WLC controller can be linked up to multiple access points, which means that the network is future-proof, and highly scalable. The best part about this deployment is the roaming facility, and I am certain that it is the same deployment method used in railway stations or hotels by which, after just connecting once, the Wi-Fi remains contagious no matter where we go. How it does, how the roaming works, we will see in further lecture. But before, let's go through a list of this kind of deployment because it is the core essential in our syllabus. So, split MAC structure allows the dynamic channel assignment, which means that WLC can automatically choose and configure the radio frequencies to prevent overlapping. It also do something called self-healing wireless coverage, which means that it automatically optimizes the transmission power of radio depending on the number of hosts connected to it, along with doing some monitoring tasks like monitoring what kind of devices are connecting with network and pairing this ability with a intrusion protection system. It also helps to enhance the security of the network. Now, after talking the benefits of a WLC, let's see what it offers as connection and interface. Right after all the benefits of a split MAC architecture, now let's jump into the connections of a wireless link controller. A wireless link controller offers physical connection in terms of ports, while the logical connection in terms of interface. In fact, both ports and interface are linked, and what we experiencing is the layer 2 and layer 3 separation. So a WLC has four kind of ports. The first is service port, second is console port, third is distribution port, and finally the fourth port is redundancy port. A service port is an special port on WLC used for out of band management, system recovery, and its maintenance. It is the only port that is active when the WLC is in boot up process. A special thing about service port is that it does not support .1Q tagging, which means it cannot be connected on a trunk port. In order to connect to a service port, we have to connect to a access port of a switch and in a different VLAN from where the normal data traffic goes. As now most of the switch comes with auto MDIX feature, so a WLC can be connected with either a straight through or a crossover cable. After connecting a WLC service port to a network, a IP address has to be assigned, which we can use to SSH or HTTPS to the WLC for configuration. Now let's talk about a console port. A console port is quite like the service port, which means it is also used for management and also supports .1Q encapsulation. It can also be used to directly get to the command line of the WLC using a terminal emulation program on a PC. A console port is a form of serial port, so in order to connect to this, a device must be configured with 9600 baud rate. Now let's discuss the distribution system port. Few minutes earlier, we have seen that a distribution system is a point where an access point joins to a wired network. So the distribution system ports are the ports that carry all the normal access point and management traffic, and depending on the type of deployment, it can either be connected into access or trunk mode. And finally, the redundancy port is used to connect two different WLCs with each other in order to improve the redundancy status of a network. And talking of redundancy, distribution ports are also can be channeled up using link aggregation protocols, and one of them that we talk about is Ether channel. Now time to discuss WLC interfaces. A WLC comes with five types of interfaces. The first is management interface, which is used for management traffic like authentication, WLC to WLC communication, or initiating the web-based or SH session for network management protocols, etc. Second type of interface is redundancy management interface. It serves its purpose when two WLCs are connected with redundancy port. The active WLC uses its management interface for regular communication, while the standby WLC uses the redundancy management interface to look after the failures of the active ones. Now, third form of interface is virtual interface. This interface is used for certain client-facing operations like assignment of IP address using DHCP and it facilitates roaming. The virtual interface also improves the security of a network because when clients wants to make a connection with a WLC, it sees the virtual interface IP address and not the actual IP address of the wireless link controller. The next interface type is service port interface, which bounds to the service port and used for out-of-band management. Remember that I have just told you that service port does not support 802.1q encapsulation and need to be connected to access port in separate VLAN. On that VLAN, a service port interface is bound. And finally, the last interface is dynamic interface. A dynamic interface is used to connect to a VLAN to a WLAN, which means that for per broadcast of VLANs, a dynamic interface is assigned to pass the traffic onto the air. Now, some more important things about a Cisco WLC, that a Cisco WLC supports up to 512 WLANs, while an AP can activate up to 16 WLANs at once. And in order to make every other device aware of its presence, it needs to send a beacon every 100 milliseconds, which means that an AP has to broadcast its presence for 10 times a second. And with so frequent broadcasts, it will be problematic if we activate multiple WLANs on an AP, as it will consume our precious bandwidth in broadcasting all the network, and there nothing will remain for the device to send or receive the actual traffic. And to configure a wireless local area network, three things must be configured. The first is SSID, that is service set identifier. Second is its controller interface, which means which VLAN number it will be broadcasting. And finally, the type of security, which we are going to look in a bit. Now, time to summarize all the WLC deployment model in quick. So, the first deployment model was unified, in which a separate device is placed in the core layer, and having a separate device enables support up to 6,000 APs with a total client support of 64,000. Second form of deployment is cloud deployment, which is a virtual device placed in core layer and enables support up to 3,000 APs and for up to 32,000 clients. Now, the third deployment model is embedded deployment, in which a WLC is placed in access layer, and under this deployment, 200 APs are supported with up to a 4,000 clients. Then the next deployment model is Mobility Express, in which the WLC is present in AP itself and it supports only 100 APs with a maximum client of 2000. And finally, there is Autonomous AP deployment model, in which no WLC is required, and with no WLC, it is unable to support any other access point except itself, and the client support is dependent on the model of the device. Another thing that you need to know is that access points are not only destined to transfer the data traffic to end user device, it also can be configured to do much more. And the different configurations of AP, we call them access point modes, and there are lot of them, but we are going to discuss only about the some popular ones. So the first is local mode, and it is the default lightweight mode of an access point for a specific channel. In this mode, the main priority of an access point is to transfer data, but in times when it is free from its regular business, it will scan the other channel to measure the level of noise interference in the transmission, and can be paired with intrusion detection system also. The intrusion detection system are kind of antivirus but for wireless network. It detects what kind of devices connects to network and what their activity are. And just like antivirus which detects a virus based on some previous defined standard, and IDS also distinguish between a dangerous device or an intruder one by seeing their activity pattern. The next AP mode that we are going to study is monitor mode. In this mode, the main objective is to act as a sensor, especially for IDS events and detecting rogue devices. Rogue devices are devices that is unauthorized by an organization and is a potential security threat. Monitor mode also determines the position of other AP and WLC using location based services. The next AP mode is Flex Connect mode. To understand Flex Connect mode, we first have to understand how AP communicates with an WLC. So, despite having a wired connection to WLC with switches in between, an AP forms a special tunnel known as cap wap tunnel, which is on port 5246 for controlling traffic and 5247 for data traffic. Cap wap stands for control and provisioning of wireless access point, and using this protocol, a WLC configures any access point in its domain, and with the same protocol, the data transmitted by AP is encapsulated, and that's why a lightweight AP does not need to be connected in trunk mode with the access switch. And in case if the cap wap tunnel fails to connect or the wireless link controller is down somehow, the flex connect mode of AP enables it to locally switch the traffic between an SSID and a VLAN without the help of CapWap tunnel. Now the next AP mode is sniffer. In a sniffer mode, an AP acts as packet capturing device. It tracks all the network packets in the surrounding and then forwards it to network analyzer software on a PC. One such software is Wireshark. The next AP mode is rogue detector mode. Apart from rogue detection, in local mode, monitor mode, rogue detector mode are the specialized access point that correlates the MAC address heard on wired network with the MAC addresses heard over air. It does so because the rogue devices are often those devices that appear on both networks. Now the next AP mode is bridge, and within the first 10 or 20 minutes of this video, when I discussed how the wired connection of a CCTV camera sends its broadcast to a different destination using some satellite like structure, that access point is configured in bridge mode. The whole point of being in bridge mode is to link two further locations, and multiple APs in a bridge can also form indoor and outdoor mesh. A mesh is the interconnection of AP with each other with the help of a wireless backhaul. A wireless backhaul is the use of wireless communication system to transport data between subnetworks. Now the next AP mode is Flex plus Bridge mode. It is simply the hybrid of Flex Connect mode and the Bridge mode, where a mesh is formed even when the link to WLC, that is of CapWeb tunnel, is down. And the last AP mode that we are going to discuss is the SE Connect mode. This mode is especially used by network designer as it uses its radio to do spectrum analysis with the objective of discovering interference in the network. And after defining the different modes of access point, we have reached the meaty topic of security. There is a saying that goes like, you can have security without privacy, but no privacy without security. So, what's the difference between security and privacy? If you already know the answer, please comment it. And those who don't, security relates to access of the data, while privacy relates to the control of data, that how it can be used. And this saying means that you can offer your data to someone securely, but you cannot guarantee that how he uses the data. Or if you make your data public, then there is no objection of privacy or uses because it can be used in whatever kind one pleases. So be safe with data. And the privacy and security is a much more necessary in context of wireless networking because here the data is not confined by the wire itself. It is free it is free flowing in the environment. So in discussion we always come in front of terms like integrity or eavesdropping, which I wish to explain beforehand so you grab the topic much more better. The integrity means the originality of data, which means that if I write a sentence, for example, I love network engineering, and in the process of transmitting this sentence, if someone translates it to I love cybersecurity, the data is said to be tampered and its integrity is hampered. While the another term, eavesdropping, means hearing the transmission in between. For example, if I'm saying something to person A, person B also hears it and will use this information against me. The eavesdropping relates to the process of hearing without authority. So, without wasting any more minutes, let's go to, let's jump onto the authentication methods as well as privacy and integrity method that Wi-Fi offers. In the days of very first Wi-Fi, there is something called open authentication, and in the casual sense, it isn't any form of authentication, which means that as long as the protocol matches, anyone can eavesdrop on the network what the data is being transmitted, and with some specialized tools, it can easily be intercepted. So, in the next iteration, an RC4 algorithm is added to the system to enable the encryption, and then open authentication gets got replaced by wired equivalent privacy. It is a very basic form of authentication as the user is authenticated by a pre-shared key, and the key has to be entered on the device manually in order to connect with an access point. For the early days, RC4 algorithms was good, but with the tremendous increase in processing power, it take no longer to find the exploit in the system. So finally, the wired equivalent privacy also got replaced by 802.1x or EAP. Here, EAP stands for Extensible Authentication Protocol. It is the most exponential upgrade over the previous two because it limits the data sharing until the user is authenticated, and even the authentication mechanism is separated into three parts. The first part is supplicant, which is the device that wants to connect to the network. Second is authenticator, which is the access point that it is connecting to. And finally, third is authentication server, that is a special device which generates the keys and certificate in order to authorize the supplicant. The complete 802.1x or EAP Extensible Authentication Protocol comes in four sub-varieties. The first is LEAP, which stands for Lightweight Extensible Authentication Protocol. It is also user and password based authentication protocol and uses the dynamic WEP keys. In short, it is a slight upgrade over the old wired equivalent privacy protocol. Then the second one is EAP FAST, which stands for Extensible Authentication Protocol, Flexible Authentication by Secure Tunneling. It is a Cisco developed protocol with whole purpose to replace LEAP because LEAP was vulnerable to dictionary based attacks. It enhances this security by establishing a mutually authenticated tunnel. It enhances this security by initiating a mutually authenticated tunnel by sending protected access credentials to the client, and after the client enters the correct user and password, the authentication is successful. Now the next form of authentication message is PEAP, which stands for Protected Extensible Authentication Protocol, which is a slight upgrade from EAP fast as it does not need to generate protected access credential for every client as it recognizes the digital certificate generated by third party. The third party is a certified authority and may be public or private. A public certificate authority is a firm that generates certificates for a small fee, and a private certificate authority is the organization itself that generates key for its connected device. Now, the next form of authentication method is EAP TLS, which stands for Extensible Authentication Protocol Transport Layer Security, and it is a tougher version of PEAP as it demands both server and client side authentication by a digital certificate, which is a very tedious task to do for each and every device. However, this task can be somehow automated using the PKI. PKI stands for Public Key Infrastructure. It is the system behind certificate generation and can be leveraged to get some automation in EAP-TLS. Now it's time to discuss some privacy and integrity method. The original Wi-Fi supports the integrity method known as TKIP, which stands for Temporal Key Integrity Protocol. It is a message integrity checking system that utilizes the key mixing, in which a 128-bit WEP key is calculated for each frame, but after the passing of time, some more improved versions of privacy and integrity methods are developed, so it became obsolete in 2012. The next privacy and integrity method is CCMP, which stands for Counter CBC MAC protocol, which uses the AES counter mode encryption, which stands for Advanced Encryption Standard. It is a symmetric form of encryption that uses the same key to encrypt and decrypt data. And the CBC MAC stands for Cipher Block Chaining Message Authentication Code. And CBC MAC stands for Cipher Block Chaining Message Authentication Code, and it is a new form of message integrity check. CCMP is a very fast, efficient, and still going used privacy and integrity check. But a further, more developed method is present, known as GCMP, which stands for Galois Counter Mode Protocol. It also comes with AES and is even more efficient than CCMP, but the only downside is that it don't have legacy support, so it will require the newest hardware. Now the question is how we can know that whether a device supports a specific authentication or not. To know that, we have to read the description offered by the device vendor. If there is nothing mentioned about encryption, we assume that the device supports the open authentication. And if the letter WPA plus WPA2 is mentioned, we understand that device supports TKIP and CCMP as the privacy and integrity method. If the device lists 802.1x, then it supports all four kind of authentication under 802.x EAP, that is LEAP, EAP fast, PEAP, EAP TLS. And if the device mentions static WEP, it supports the original WEP, the one with static WEP keys. If the device says that it supports static VEP, static WEP plus 802.1x, it means that device supports the partial extensible authentication protocol with original WEP. If device says CKIP, then it means that device supports Cisco Key Integrity Protocol, which is a proprietary Cisco protocol. And if the device says that it supports none plus EAP pass-through, it means that device supports open authentication with remote EAP authentication. Some of the newer device which mentions WPA3 support, which means the device supports the latest and newest GCMP along with PMF. The PMF stands for Protected Management Frame, which is a service or feature found in latest generation of Wi-Fi, which uses advanced authentication for certain management frames so that it cannot be tampered with. And before closing this topic, I want to make you all aware of the two modes of authentication. The first is personal and second mode of authentication is enterprise. In personal mode of authentication, a pre-shared key is passed between client and the devices that support WPA, and WPA2 will uses a four-way handshake to establish and authenticate a connection, while the device supporting WPA3 will use a SAE, which stands for Simultaneous Authentication of Equal. It is a password-based security protocol that enables two devices to establish a secure connection using different passwords. It works by stacking multiple authentication methods inside the tunnel, so it is pretty much safe from all different kind of attack like dictionary or man in the middle attack. And all the enterprise authentication uses 802.1x authentication method and is not in our syllabus. So be relaxed and thanks for being patient with me.